Somewhere around 11,000 years ago, a random genetic mutation swept through a handful of early farming communities and quietly altered the course of human civilization. That mutation allowed adults to keep producing lactase, the enzyme that breaks down milk sugar, long after weaning. Before that twist of molecular fate, every human on Earth lost the ability to comfortably digest milk by early childhood. Today, roughly 65 to 70% of the global adult population still cannot digest lactose efficiently, according to data compiled by the National Institutes of Health. The ability to drink milk as an adult is not the biological default. It is the exception. The story begins with the domestication of goats, sheep, and cattle. Early pastoral communities discovered that grazing animals could convert inedible grasses into calorie-dense, nutrient-rich liquid. In lean seasons, access to that liquid meant the difference between survival and starvation. Groups carrying the lactase persistence trait gained a measurable evolutionary advantage, and natural selection did what it does best. The trait spread through populations that depended on dairy herds, particularly across Northern Europe and parts of East Africa and the Middle East. A meta-analysis spanning 89 countries and over 62,000 participants found that lactose malabsorption prevalence ranges from around 28% in Northern and Western Europe to over 70% in the Middle, East, and parts of East Asia, where rates climb past 90% in some communities. Milk is a food that human biology never universally agreed to accept. Few foods have generated as many contradictory health claims as milk. Older observational studies once linked dairy consumption to elevated risks of breast, colon, and prostate cancer, sparking alarm. But large-scale meta-analyses have since painted a more measured picture. Research indicates that moderate dairy consumption, roughly 100 to 250 milliliters per day, shows no meaningful association with increased cancer risk. The calcium naturally present in milk may even offer a modest protective effect against colorectal cancer, though scientists have not confirmed whether milk itself or calcium from any source drives the benefit. Only at very high intakes, above approximately 1.25 liters daily, have some studies observed a possible link to prostate cancer. And even those findings remain inconsistent across research populations. A 2025 umbrella review published in Nutrients synthesized decades of prospective cohort data and found no significant association between total dairy intake and risk of coronary heart disease, stroke, or overall mortality. Some evidence hints that dairy consumption correlates with lower rates of hypertension, though the data are not yet strong enough to make definitive claims. The bone health picture is surprisingly underwhelming. Despite milk's reputation as a skeleton builder, multiple studies in adults have found neither strongly positive nor negative effects on bone mineral density. A 2024 review noted that fracture risk was actually higher among individuals following dairy-free diets, such as veganism, while fermented dairy products showed modest protective effects against age-related bone loss. One of the most persistent worries about modern milk involves what might be hiding inside it: hormones, antibiotics, and pesticides. The reality is considerably less dramatic than the fear. Bovine milk does contain naturally occurring hormones, but at concentrations so vanishingly small that a person would need to consume roughly 5,000 liters to match the hormonal dose in a single oral contraceptive pill. Even at that absurd volume, most of those hormones would be destroyed by the digestive system before reaching the bloodstream. This is the same biological barrier that forces pharmaceutical companies to coat medications with protective layers so they survive the journey through stomach acid. Regulatory frameworks in most developed nations set strict thresholds for pesticide and antibiotic residues in milk, and batches exceeding those limits are pulled before reaching consumers. Skim milk has been statistically associated with a 24% increase in acne rates, a connection that appears to involve insulin-like growth factor pathways rather than fat content. Dairy allergies affect approximately 1 in 18 children in some European populations, though most children outgrow these sensitivities. For the lactose-intolerant majority of the global population, discomfort after drinking milk is not a flaw in the food, but a reminder that adult milk consumption is an evolutionary novelty. The body is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what pre-agricultural humans were programmed to do, shutting down an enzyme never designed to keep running past infancy. The global dairy industry is responsible for approximately 3% of all greenhouse gas emissions, exceeding the combined carbon footprint of the entire commercial aviation sector. Around 33% of the world's cropland is devoted to feeding livestock, including dairy cattle. A 2025 study in the Journal of Dairy Science examining U.S. dairy farms found that greenhouse gas emissions related to milk production represented about 1.6% of all American emissions. Between 2007 and 2020, the U.S. dairy industry reduced emissions per unit of milk by 13%, while increasing total production by 28%. But aggregate emissions continued to climb. Life cycle assessments consistently show that oat, soy, and almond milks produce at least 68% fewer greenhouse gas emissions than cow's milk per liter. Oat milk scores as well as or better than dairy across all 12 environmental impact categories, examined in a comprehensive 2022 analysis, including land use, acidification, and ecotoxicity. Among plant-based options, only soy milk naturally approaches the protein content of cow's milk, while others require artificial fortification to match its vitamin and mineral profile. Almond milk, despite its low carbon emissions, carries a water footprint comparable to dairy when produced in drought-prone regions like California. The environmental calculus is clear but incomplete, and the lowest impact choice depends on local growing conditions, making regionally produced alternatives the most consistently sustainable option. Precision fermentation, a technology that programs microorganisms to produce specific proteins, has enabled startups to create dairy-identical whey and casein without involving a single animal. As of early 2025, at least 88 precision fermentation startups had collectively raised more than $2.8 billion to develop animal-free proteins, with the dairy segment attracting the most commercial attention. Companies including Perfect Day, Remilk, and Imagine Dairy have achieved regulatory approval for fermentation-derived whey protein in the United States, while Vivici, backed by dairy giant Fonterra and DSM Firmenich, raised over €32 million in 2025 to scale production of beta-lactoglobulin and lactoferrin. These proteins are molecularly identical to those found in cow's milk, meaning they can be transformed into cheese, yogurt, and ice cream with the stretch, melt, and creaminess that plant-based alternatives have struggled to replicate due to their lack of casein and whey. Major food multinationals, including Nestle, Mars, and Unilever, have already trialed products using precision fermented dairy proteins. Preliminary assessments suggest the technology could reduce greenhouse gas emissions, land use, and water consumption by over 90% compared to conventional dairy. The global precision fermentation market is projected to grow from roughly $6 billion in 2026 to over $113 billion by 2034. Milk may soon be decoupled from the animal that has produced it for millennia. The question facing society is no longer simply whether to drink milk, but whether the definition of milk itself is about to fundamentally change. Thanks for watching. If you have anything to add, drop a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos exploring the world around us.